Good morning.
Good morning.
We are here on the 25th of June, 2015 at the JCC doing an interview with Michael Charne for the purposes of the Roots to Boots project. Michael, I appreciate you being here with us this morning, and the way I'd like to start this interview is to ask you to tell us a little bit about the background of your family prior to their entry into South Africa. What do you know about perhaps your grandparents or great-grandparents or the folks that came before the South African experience? Where did they live and how did they get to South Africa?
My grandparents were born in Kovna, in Lithuania. How they came to South Africa was quite a long story. A lot of Lithuanian Jews fled from the Cossacks, particularly the young men who were looked after. And my father left the country in 1927. All he took with him was his Talmud and his Siddur at the age of 15, and he was put on a boat to South Africa as the front runner for the family. He came to South Africa in 1927 and worked in South Africa, and then slowly but surely sent money home to his parents and his son and his brothers, and they brought them out one by one to South Africa. So South Africa has a very strong Lithuanian Jewry background, and that's how they all came across, virtually with no education, just with their own abilities to make ends meet.
What about on your mother's side?
My mother was born in South Africa. Her parents came from England. So also the British sent a lot of Jewry across to South Africa, and that's how my mother and my father met in South Africa, and that was the beginning of my parents.
How did they meet? What age did they meet?
My father was about 32 years old. My mother was 8 years younger than him, so she must have been 24. How they met, I'm not sure. I think he told me that he saw her, this pretty lady, sitting at the bus stop every morning.
And what was he doing as a profession at that time?
At that time, I'm not sure exactly at that stage in his life. He was 32, so he had gone through quite a different hard labor type of employment. He worked on the Lichtenberg diggings, which was in 1927 to 32 was the World Depression, and jobs were very difficult to find, and he worked with the pick and shovel, digging roads and doing that type of thing. So he had hard labor in the beginning. He told me he worked in the abattoirs, carrying dead carcasses, and then slowly but surely moved to a place called Vereeniging, which is a small steel manufacturing center in South Africa. And there he got a loan from someone, a friend of his, and he started a bicycle shop. So he started at Louis Bicycles, that was his name, Louis Charne. So he started a bicycle shop and got the franchise of Raleigh Bicycles. And he had a lucky break doing that, and his honesty and integrity got him the concessionary rights for the steel company in Vereeniging, Iscor, which is the biggest steel manufacturer in the world today.
Was this after he married your mother?
Yes. That's how he started his industrial career. So, and then from there he started growing. So that was the first break that gave him capacity to grow and make a good income. And then he started in 1944, I think, he started the glass industry in South Africa. He was the founder of window glass installations and motor car windscreens and mirrors and tabletops and all that type of thing. He started a company called Anglo-African Glass with his brother Max Charne.
And where was your family living at that time?
They were in Vereeniging, and then he moved to Johannesburg.
And was this before or after your birth?
They moved to Johannesburg before my birth. My brother was born in Vereeniging in 1943.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 47. So my dad came to Johannesburg, I think, in 44. So I'm born in Johannesburg, in a suburb, Emmarentia, which was a very strong Jewish neighborhood, and he was one of the founders of the Emmarentia synagogues and the Lions Shul in downtown area. That's where my mother was born in think it was Boyson Street in Boysons.
Mhm.
So that's history. It's the Lion Schools is still standing today. It's a famous sort of synagogue on the main thoroughfare into Johannesburg and out the main city, and that's been going for quite some time now.
So your family was very influential in that show?
Very much so.
Mhm.
My father and my grandfather's name is on the entry to they dedicated a room to his honor, which my father and my family supported all those years, and I think it's still standing to this day. It still is there. It's called the Lion Synagogue in Johannesburg.
Lion Synagogue, okay. So did you go to a Hebrew day school as a child?
I went to King David Primary School and High School in Linksfield,
Mhm.
and both my children went to King David in Victory Park. They graduated, well, my elder daughter graduated there just about in the trip when she came across to Dallas. So they had both been educated in King David, which is a very upgrade quality Jewish day school, very well recognized in South Africa.
As a child in South Africa, aside from going to Jewish day school, were you also involved in Zionistic activities as a child?
I think a lot of South African Jews in the Six-Day War were very Zionistic at that time, but I was very influenced and quite religious in my day. I laid out the Torah on the Sabbath in the main synagogue.
Mhm.
I conducted the Jewish day services in the children's synagogue, and up until I was 18, took a very active role in the shul synagogue. So I was in the choir and that type of thing. So I was very proud of my heritage and what we stood for. I was associated with a lot of Jewish charities in South Africa.
For instance?
I sat on the committee of the Oxford Synagogue. I was the chairman of the Young Associates of the Ben Gurion University of Israel.
Mhm.
I sat on the board I was a trustee for Aisha Torah South Africa
Mhm.
and the Selwyn Siegel Home. So I was associated with that, and also the Jewish Orphanage. We had a committee that was acting to help fundraising called Hope, to help our people exist, which was all related to the Jewish Orphanage.
So you were very philanthropically oriented as a young person, which is quite unusual.
Right through my period of time in South Africa, I was always involved in charitable work, and until I came to the States.
Mhm.
I resigned all those positions prior to me leaving South Africa.
So when you were in South Africa, did you go on to college studies there as well?
I studied at university. I did a Bachelor of Commerce in Accountancy and Law.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was at university, I started my own business, which was right across the road from the university. I bought a small company called British Glass with my brother, which was a small glass works in South Africa, in Johannesburg. My father, as I said, was the founder of the industry, and he sold out to a company called Plate Glass, which gave them the monopoly of glass in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an elderly gentleman, Mr. Sachs, who got stabbed on a Saturday morning in a robbery in the business, and he was 68 or 69 years old, and he couldn't go to the company, so he asked my brother to come and help him while at that time, which he did. And then we eventually bought that company, and then we built from there. So while I was at university, I started a company called Float Glass, which was part of British Glass. And then we joined Bala Rand, which was one of the biggest companies in Africa, in the top 500 in the world. And we opened up 85 branches over 6 years in South Africa, covering the whole of South Africa in the glass industry, together with Bala Rand.
My goodness.
So that was the start of my working career.
Uh-huh. And at what point did you meet your wife?
I met my wife when I was about 37 years old, later in life.
Here in the States or
no,
in South Africa?
In South Africa. I met her at a Jewish wedding that night, and it was quite a quick love affair. So, yeah, that was in 1985 I met with her. We got married in 1987, March 15.
And you had children when you were in South Africa?
Yes, I had 2 children, John and Laurel. Charne is my elder daughter. She's today in a final year studying for law at USD in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger daughter Laurel also graduated from, I'm just blank for a second. She graduated from UT in Texas in Austin. Both daughters went to UT in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
University of Texas. And she graduated in communication, corporate communication and networking and finance. And today she's working at a company called Conversant in California and Los Angeles, doing multimedia.
So at what point did you decide that you no longer wanted to live in South Africa?
South Africa post-Mandela. In 1994, Mandela came to power.
Mm-hmm.
I was very active in the changeover of South Africa, in the encouragement of black advancement and upliftment projects. A lot of Jews in South Africa were very favorable to that.
Mm-hmm.
Helen Suzman was the leader of,
Right.
of the party at that stage and got a lot of publicity in trying to help Mandela get out of jail and go forward with the Progressive Party. So I actually played a very dominant role. In 1992, I befriended or acquainted myself with the National Union of Mine Workers, which was the biggest union in South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and met up with all the presidents and the general secretaries in the powerhouses and sort of sold them properties and put together a block development for their head office and helped them finance it. So I was literally one of the few white people that actually gained access to the National Union of Mine Workers, which is a black union,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Mine Workers Union. It was a very powerful union, very strong, and it literally brought South Africa to its knees when the changeover and the striking and all of those difficult things in times prior to Nelson Mandela becoming the president. There was a lot of political strife and uncertainty that was taking part in South Africa. It was actually quite scary times.
Mm-hmm.
They thought there was going to be a black on white revolution,
Right.
and that would have been a catastrophe for all to come if that took place. Thank God it never took place, and Nelson Mandela and the President of South Africa at that stage both got the Nobel Peace Prizes for accommodating a changeover in a peaceful manner. I was fortunate enough to meet the National Union of Mine Workers, and they were talking about social upliftment and redistribution of wealth and all of those good things which would never work in a society as sophisticated as South Africa. And I encouraged them to go forward with what they call a Black Empowerment Public Listing, an IPO. And I listed a public company called Matoma, which is the Sotho word for the beginning of the transition from whites to blacks. So it was the beginning of a new generation of South Africa. It was a very successful public statement, a very strong political statement, and brought the current hierarchy in the current government. The President of South Africa sat on my board of directors as one of the first black shareholders in South African history, in fact in the world, where the union became a public company. And I got a lot of public awards in terms of that and recognition. I was elected to the Entrepreneur of the Year award for Ernst & Young International, and got world recognition all over the place for actually bringing that forward in a peaceful manner, which was a very big highlight of my life. It was an exciting era, which I enjoyed doing and participating in. But what I did find thereafter was that corruption started picking its head up in South Africa in a very unpleasant way. And of my 10 directors on the board of directors that we had, which was 5 white and 5 black, 7 out of the 10 people had been shot at, hijacked, carjacked, or been robbed. So that's a very high statistic. And then in 1998, I was personally carjacked in my home, 4 guys with guns to my head. Lucky to be alive because they were shooting people in those days to make the next attack that much easier. And they wanted to go into my home and rape my family, which was not a very pleasant experience. I managed to talk them out of doing that, thank goodness. And that was a nasty experience which stayed with me for quite a while thereafter. lucky to be alive, as I say, but had set the ball in motion because I felt that for my children's future, there's no future there in South Africa, unfortunately. It's very sad because South Africa was a beautiful country with a lot of good people, black and white, but there was a small minority that created this unpleasantries and insecurity, and the government itself didn't eradicate it and forcefully deal with it. They participated in it. The police force became corrupt and still are today, and it's deteriorating quite rapidly. So in retrospect, which was 12 years ago since I immigrated to America, that deterioration in South Africa is very noticeable now. The standards of education, the standards of medical treatment, the currency connection, the stability of the country, the power failures and the power outages. There's just a lot of, unfortunately, deterioration in a very, very sophisticated economy. And it's very sad to see that taking place. And that's caused a lot of brain drain from South Africa. A lot of people have emigrated. And South Africa has lost a lot of good doctors and dentists and lawyers and brain power, which could have been very supportive in the growth of the country. And it's one of those things. So for my children's future, I took that decision at 55 to emigrate and give them a chance, even though starting at 55 again was a very hard thing to start all over in a new country and understanding the new laws and environments and things like that. It's very difficult to do.
How did you choose Dallas?
My choice was Dallas or San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
San Diego, I've got all my good friends who had immigrated from South Africa. There's a big South African Jewish population there. Community very strong and very noticeable for the Jewish community and charity. But I had a lot of family here in Dallas who my only living uncle and aunt were living here in Dallas, Benny and Etty Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
And Benny was my mother's brother,
Mm-hmm.
and all my first cousins had moved to Dallas following them, and we built up like 45 cousins here in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a cousin, Norman Charne, who had just sold his business, and we were very close like brothers. And we started a private equity company called Vision Equity together in 2003 when I came to do private equity and property syndication. And one thing just led to another, and he went in his direction. There was no conflict. There wasn't a conflict. It was just a matter of income streams and how we could make livings together and independently. And I chose to go into financial services, and he chose to build a company. And it's been good for both of us. So I'm with Merrill Lynch now as a senior financial advisor, doing very well. I'm partners with Brett Levy, whose mother and my father, whose mother Renee and her father Percy Glickman, and my father were best friends. They came out from Lithuania together, and they remained best friends till the day they died. So I have a very close relationship with a lot of good friends in South African community here in Dallas that I've known all my life. So it was a natural move to move to Dallas. It was just like changing suburbs.
Did you find then the welcoming into the South African community here easy?
Very easy.
Very easy.
I was very fortunate to come into America. I came in on what they call an EB1 visa because of what I had done in South Africa for the upliftment of blacks and helping the country change and being internationally recognized. I got what they call an EB1 visa, which is quite an honorary thing if you get recognized for a Nobel Peace Prize, for example. It's a open social category, which is good for the community to have that strength associated. And my lawyer managed to see that I was worthy of such a visa. I didn't think I would qualify, but surprisingly I qualified. I was very proud of that fact. And it's sort of rolled out a red carpet for me to come into the community for an American point of view quite well. And a lot of people have recognized that EB1 visa as being a very important thing, particularly in business. So where the government has rubber stamped your credentials. So for what I did in South Africa has all been approved by the United States government. And That was quite a nice thing for myself to
I'm sure.
have
I think
experienced.
you're very proud of that.
I am.
Yeah.
So,
Now, in terms of the integration into the South African community here, you say it was very easy. What about the integration into the community as a whole, the non-South Africans? Were they also welcoming?
South Africans, I found in America, in Dallas, have been a little bit closed-niched. They're closed-circuited. But because our kids were young and we went to Jewish day school, Solomon Schechter, and the Levine Academy, we befriended a lot of Americans, got to know them, their children integrated with our children, and we made a lot of American friends quite quickly because of the school environment. And we've retained those friendships. And then in business and my golfing friends are all very American. So I would say 60% of our social network is South African, 40% is American, who've been very warming and welcoming. So it's been good on both sides. I've enjoyed my move to Dallas. I never felt like a total stranger. I felt in a way that I belong, and there was a very warm environment and very warming and, you know, welcoming. So that move was not as hard as I anticipated it to be. A lot of people come to a place, you know, they say that a city is only as good as the people that you meet. Well, I've had a fortunate experience. The people that we've met have been fantastic and supportive, and they adopt you like a family member. And we built some very, very close relationships in a matter of 10 years, which is fantastic. And the support of that community has been phenomenal.
Did you get involved with a synagogue here or any of the social organizations, the philanthropic organizations here in this city the way you had back in South Africa?
I didn't get totally immersed in that because it took up a lot of time to be on committees and to be involved in committees. I have offered my services to quite a few. I'm on a charity committee at the moment, the Hebrew Order of David, which we've just formulated in Dallas. It's a South African Jewish charity. It's like it's a body of people that put together a fundraising charitable service to help people in times of need.
Oh.
So we've just started that a couple of months back, and we've already got 70 participants or members who are participating in the Hebrew Order of David, and I think we will start doing quite some interesting things and projects to help people. So we're associating with the Jewish Family Services. There's quite a lot of talk about different fundraising events that we're starting already. So yes, I'm starting to get involved in that because I feel I need to dedicate some of my time to that. But the first 7 or 8 years were pretty difficult for me to re-establish myself in Dallas. From a financial point of view, it was a big strain to put through university children with money, and your currencies are devalued completely in South Africa, so the wealth that I had dissipated tremendously because of the currency devaluations, and the cost of living in America is so much higher than that in South Africa. So it has not all just been sailing. It's been a pretty hard transition from a financial point of view, but from a friendship, a comforted security point of view, it's the best decision I think I've made.
How does the Hebrew Order of David differ from something like the Hebrew Free Loan?
I'm not fully aware of the Hebrew Free Loan, but I think the Hebrew Free Loan is part of the Jewish Family Services.
No, it's a separate organization.
I don't know it.
Okay, well, you and I can talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
I'm kind of
I'd
curious.
be interested.
Yeah.
But it's a normal charity in times of need, who is needing of support, and how do we help that need, and how do we help and finance them and facilitate that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more about that.
With pleasure. I'll sit and talk to you about that.
Okay.
So Dallas has been kind to me. I've enjoyed the people. The city itself is very warming I find the Texans very warm people to mix with. The Jewish community has been very strong, surprisingly so. Coming from South Africa, which was very Zionistic in its concept and thought. We joined Sherith Israel community. It's a very strong, powerful, committed community. It's a little bit different to South Africa, where we were mainly Orthodox, and this is more conservative Orthodox. those adaptations were again a trial, but all things being equal, I think it's been a positive move.
Is there anything you miss about South Africa?
I miss my friends. My brother is still there. My wife's family is there. My mother-in-law has just got a green card now, so she's looking to immigrate. My brother-in-law might start looking to immigrate. But my older brother it's too late for him to immigrate. He's 70 years old and he's got his establishment with his family there. So those are the things I miss, my good friends that are lifelong friends in certain communities that I had. Things have changed.
Do you go back to visit?
I went back twice and I didn't have a good experience on the second time. I thought I was being carjacked again.
When was the last time you went back?
5 years ago.
And you were carjacked again the second time?
I thought I was, but it wasn't.
Oh gosh.
But it wasn't funny because I had my daughter in the car with me. And maybe it was just my mind was thinking, everything of the worst. So, but it's still a beautiful place to visit. I just haven't had the opportunity the last 5 years because I joined Merrill Lynch 5 years ago, and it's been a very demanding type of thing to build up a business in a time frame. And to go to South Africa, you can't just fly over there for a weekend and come back. It's quite a long experience.
It's about you should go for 3 weeks.
You go to 2 weeks minimum to 3 weeks, and I couldn't afford to do that in the last 5 years. So we're planning a trip one of these days. We'll go back. I'm missing my golf and my golfing buddies there, my family, and it's still a wonderful country. So,
are there any particular traditions that you brought with you that you think might be unique?
You mean from the South African
point of view?
The South African jury celebrated the Friday nights, and quite strongly. I found that in the American way, not many people follow a Friday night traditional service. I say that as a generalization, maybe I'm wrong. But on the people that I've met from the American side, they don't have the traditional Sabbath evening. And that's a very nice thing that I've experienced, and we do that. The South African community come together consistently at different homes on a Friday night, which is a very nice tradition that keeps the Jewish community solidly, on the right path, in my opinion.
I think that's comes more from the Orthodox orientation.
Yeah, the Lithuanian jury, which is Ashkenazi, were quite traditional and orthodox in their way. The American way is more reform, conservative, but more leaning towards reformat, and that's what I found. I'm not saying that that's totally the case. There's the Lubavitcher, there's different types of Jewish movements here, but as far as tradition is concerned, I love the traditional Jewish holidays. We participate in them here equally. So there's not that much of a change from a traditional point of view in terms of my current lifestyle to what I experienced in South Africa. What I miss is the blacks' integration with the whites was quite unique, and they were really, really good people. I enjoyed them. And they had a lot of traditions of their own, which is South African traditions and culture that is unique. I mean, it's soft and it's got certain aspects that you don't see in America. There's a softness between white and black in South Africa. In America, there's more an aggression between white and black, which is sad because, in a way, South African blacks went through much harder times than I would say the blacks in America, even though there's a 200-year gap. But from a traditional point of view, the lifestyle in South Africa, the softness of the environment, the softness of the people, was very warming. That's not what I see here in America. You've got a different culture and a different feeling and a different environment, and all the racial hatred that we're seeing today taking place, we don't see that in South Africa. And it's quite strange. I would imagine that should have been the case. It's very sad because there's a period that you overcome and put that behind and start building towards a future common goal, and everybody with equal opportunity should be quite happy. South Africa had a much more aggressive political policy, which was like a police state, which was hard to live under, and it experience, and which I didn't agree with, than what America has. America has a Bill of Rights which protects everybody. South Africa didn't. They were treated as secondary citizens for a long period. And even under those hardships, there was not the hatred it built, because there was a commonality that was to the best of all. But change needed to take place, and did take place. And now you're seeing a different type of integrated political tone, which is, in my opinion, not healthy. So, traditions are few and far, you know. It's how do you classify what's right and what's wrong. You try and do what's in your best interest and for you and your family, and that's what I've done.
Is there anything perhaps that I've forgotten to ask or that you'd like to add?
In terms of just generalization?
General things that you'd like to leave as a legacy for your family in this interview?
Yeah. My history of my parents was very unique in a way, where I saw the struggle of the Jewish people from the world, running away from the world, okay, and moving from country to country for their survival. And there was always an indecision when it would be my decision to make a move like that, that would be required for me to move my family the same way as my parents were moved to this country by their parents, the grandchildren. You know, my father was sent out to this country to get away from the Cossacks who were killing all the Jewish youth. That was quite severe. Hitler was another situation that was quite severe, that caused a lot of movements on traffic flow from South Africa, or from the world to South Africa. South Africa opened the doors to Jewish people in those days, which was one of the few countries that did that. In 1945, when Hitler chased all the Jews out of Germany and everything else, very few countries opened their doors to accept the Jews. America was always supportive of the Jewish state of Israel, and Colin Powell, who was a black man, you know, I'm not trying to be racialistic here, played a very important part in the role of me making a decision to leave South Africa. And I was very entrenched in South Africa for a lot of things, but there comes times in life that you've got to make a long-term decision, which is not an easy one. And to separate families and bonds and friends is a very difficult emotional experience. But sometimes it's necessary to do, much like my forefathers did for their children, and I had to make that same decision for my children. Hopefully I made that right decision. So it's a difficult thing to say what I would like to leave as a legacy, but I hope that well, should I say, I hope that peace comes to sense, and that the necessity to make those type of strong moves away from your loved ones and away from your environment that you're comfortable with and that you enjoy and that you're brought up with, and that feels like a natural resource and a strength. To move away from that is a very difficult decision. A lot of people have done it and survived, but they always have this emptiness because they've left something behind. But I gave the children, my children, I think, and we're quite convinced that the decision was right. We gave them an opportunity to have a better education than we had, to have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And without those, there's some essentials of life that you miss. So those are the ingredients that caused us to move and brought about that change in a positive manner. And I hope that America stays faithful to the cause and giving everybody the right to freedom of religion, freedom of practice, and those type of things that are essential to life. And for all in one, they have the background and they have the philosophy. It's just a matter of following it through. So I don't know if that message makes some sense.
Well, I think it does. I think, first of all, it shows two things. One, it shows the strength of you and your family of knowing when to make the change when you have to, but also the hope on your part that your children don't have to make that change, but hopefully they're in the right place.
Well, It was an interesting day when I saw Colin Powell walk out of a political forum conference in Durban, arm in arm with the Israeli ambassador. And they both walked out when attacks by the PLO were made for the Palestinian cause against the South African jury and against America for standing and siding with Israel. And that was under the banner of Nelson Mandela, who tried to create a forum of positivity between nations to set aside the differences, and he could have become the saint of saints if he would have achieved that. But instead, the conference was turned into an attack on America for slavery reparations and an attack on Israel for the Palestinian cause. And the whole purpose of that forum that was developed by Nelson Mandela fell apart when America and Israel, arm in arm, walked out, the smallest country and the biggest country, walked out arm in arm out of a conference which was for the improvement of nations completely throughout the world. And I remember sitting on my patio that day reading the front page of the Business Day, where there was a big picture of Colin Powell and the words that he spoke about what he stood for and what America stood for, and the insanity of what that conference turned out to be. And I had tears in my eyes, and I felt nauseous at the same time, because here I was very much involved in the change of South Africa and felt good about it. Mm-hmm. And here all of a sudden I was embarrassed as a Jew, as a South African, for what pain and what I saw that was taking place through this. And Gaddafi were there, and all the name brands that were there. And my wife came over to me and said, "What's wrong with you?" So I had a tear in my eye, because my father once said to me, when anti-Semitism picks its head up, it's time to start packing your bags and moving and doing changes to your life that may be necessities. As much and strong as you feel about doing these things, you must stand by your beliefs and always fulfill that. And it was sad, because it had this connection, and there was the opportunity that had changed peacefully and in the best interests of whites and blacks in South Africa, which was a remarkable feat on Nelson Mandela's part. And I met Nelson Mandela. We gave him an honorary doctorate for Ben Gurion University, and we built quite a serious relationship. Our local rabbi was very favorable to him, and even with that, he still had to respect the people that put him into power and supported his fights in terms of Gaddafi and all of those guys who most probably funded him and sourced him with arms and ammunition and things like that. And that relationship with the Jewish people never founded, but it was cut back. And I always felt that that's the beginning of the fall. If anybody started with the Jews in history, it's always faltered and it's always deteriorated. And in retrospect, I'm sorry to say that in this case, it's done the same thing. I hope America learns from the lesson not to start with Israel, because I believe that that's not the case. And from supporting them, it's grown country, it's grown very strongly. But Israel is unique. Jewish people are unique, so I'm very sensitive to that. So history repeats itself, and I hope we don't have to repeat our situation again.
I hope not.
I'm here for good, and please God, my days I'll see through in America, and I hope my children will have a healthy life in America, and the grandchildren, and it's a great country, it's a beautiful place, and I'm honored to be here, and I've had a lot of good friends and associates, and been happy to say so.
Thank you so much, Michael. This has
Thank
been
you
a
for
pleasure. I've enjoyed very much getting to know you and hearing your history.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your addition to the Roots to Boots project.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for putting it forward. I think it's a great opportunity for you to
Thank you
develop.
so much.
All the best.
Okay.